Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Our next witness, Mr. Mark Harris, will be giving evidence by video link from his home. Although the risk of contracting COVID-19 as a result of attending this building is small, I'm satisfied that in his case, it would not be reasonable to require him to come here to give his evidence. Steps have been taken to ensure that he gives his evidence without any risk of intervention by others. So I'm going to begin by checking that Mr. Harris can see and hear me clearly. Good morning, Mr. Harris.
Morning, sir. Yeah, I can see and hear you clearly.
Good, thank you very much. Can I ask you then to make the affirmation, which you've got, I think, either on the screen or on a card in front of you?
I have in front of me, yes.
Right. Off you go then, please.
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Good, thank you very much. Now, can I just run through a couple of things with you before I invite Mr. Millett to start asking some questions? Can you confirm that you're alone in the room from which you're giving evidence?
I am, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you also confirm that you only have with you the documents that the inquiry has provided to you?
I do. Would you like to see them, sir? Or
No, we'll take your word for it, but you don't have any other materials with you?
No, I don't. No.
Right, thank you. Can you also confirm, please? No, I've lost you. Can you still see me?
I can see you. I can see a document on the screen as well. Oh, no, it's just you now.
Right, good, thank you. Can you also please confirm for me that your mobile phone is in another room and that you don't have any other electronic device in the room with you which could receive messages?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Now, you should know that your counsel, Mr. Renters, is here sitting with us, listening to your evidence and watching you give it. And if anything crops up that he feels he needs to bring to my attention, he's here to do that. All right?
Okay. Yes.
I'd hope we shan't have any problems with sound or vision. If we have any problems with sound, please could you attract your attention by raising your hand or some other gesture to make it clear that you can't hear any longer, and then we'll take steps to sort it out. Last thing, we'll have a break in any event during the morning, roughly halfway through the morning. But if you feel you need a break at any other time, please just say so, and we can do that. All right?
Okay. Yes.
Anything you need to clarify before you start answering questions?
No, I think I'm fine. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Harris. Can I just start by thanking you very much for attending today, even remotely, to give evidence. We very much appreciate it. If you have any difficulty understanding my questions, then I'm happy to repeat the question or put the question in a different way. The other thing is, can you see me clearly when I'm asking you questions?
I can, sir. Yeah, see you
good.
perfectly clear.
And you can hear me well enough, can you?
I can, yeah.
Very good. Can I ask you to try to keep your voice up so that the transcribers who are sitting in this room with us can hear you? And also, don't nod or shake your head. Say yes or no, if that's appropriate, accordingly. All right? Now, you've made two witness statements. I want to show them to you, first of all. You have them in hard copy, but they'll also appear on the screen in front of you. The first is the Metropolitan Police statement of the 30th of November 2017 at MET 30/12823. Can you please be shown that? Can you see that on the screen?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Right. It was a little slow. We'll try and speed that up as we go. If you look at the top of page 1, is that your electronic signature at the top?
It is, yeah.
And have you read this statement recently?
I have.
Can you confirm that its contents are true?
Yes.
The second statement is the inquiry statement that you made on the 8th of November 2018. Can I please have that? That's HAR 3010159. Is that the first page of your inquiry statement? Can you confirm?
I confirm confirm, yeah, it is.
Thank you. And can you confirm you've read this statement recently?
I have.
And if you look at page 16, which is on the screen in front of you, is that your signature?
It is, yeah.
And can you confirm that the contents of that statement are true?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to start with some general questions about your background. Would you agree with me that you don't have any formal qualifications in respect of facade engineering or the like?
That's correct, sir, yeah.
Can I just say, I think the document can be taken down for the moment. We can have Mr. Harris back on the screen. You've been involved, I think, in the facade industry for about 30 years, haven't you?
Yeah, I think it's about 32 now, because obviously at the time of the
Yes.
statement it was about 32, yeah.
Mr. Millett, pause for a second. We need to have Mr. Harris full screen unless we have a document up. So can we have him back full screen, please? Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Millett, on you go.
And during your 32 years now, is it fair to say that you have amassed a wealth of knowledge in the facade industry generally?
Yeah, I think that knowledge is, I think that'd be a true thing to say, but it's general knowledge in terms of the role I've had, in other words, the business development side of the industry.
Now, at paragraph 34 of your statement, page 8, I don't think there's any need to put it up. I'll just read you what you say. You say, in response to a question regarding the building regulations, I'm unable to answer questions relating to building regulations compliance. I'm not qualified in this regard, and this matter would be dealt with by a suitably qualified person or persons within the client team, Ryden, Studio E, and Harley. I've read that out to you. Does it follow from that you wouldn't ordinarily advise on, for example, whether an overall design or structure would comply with the building regulations as part of your role at Harley?
No.
Would you be qualified to advise on compliance of specific products?
No.
Or specific design elements?
No.
And it's right, I think, to say that you don't have any design expertise.
No, that's correct.
During your relationship with Harley, do you know what formal or internal competency training Harley provided to staff or contractors such as yourself to keep up to date with industry-accepted codes of practice?
Not totally. I do know that they had members of the team that had gone for MSc in facade engineering, for example. So I know that they had individuals that had gone through that training.
Did you personally keep up to date with developments in the cladding industry generally?
It depends what you mean by up to date. I mean, I'm not keeping up to date with technical things because that's not my remit in life. But I would be keeping up to date with general things. So it really depends what you mean by that.
Well, let me give you one or two examples. Did you keep up to date with the technical bulletins that came from industry bodies such as the BCA, the Building Control Alliance, or CWCT?
No.
Now, your specialism was in what I think you describe as the front end of the facade business. By that, do you mean that you were focused on the client side of the facade industry?
It's really the front end is what I would call seeking out opportunities to tender. Excuse me. There's quite often an ultimate client that we won't have any connection with. Our client tends to be a main contractor or a principal contractor, such as Ryden, for example.
Yes.
So I would be pursuing companies such as those, as well as sometimes early doors things like with architects. Yeah.
So is it fair to say that your focus would be on obtaining new work and developing relationships with clients who might then provide work in the future in order to promote Harley?
Absolutely correct, yeah.
And to do that, you would liaise with companies that sat both above and below Harley in the supply chain. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Now, from about 2011, is it right that you worked exclusively full-time for Harley?
I think that was probably about right, yeah. I can't remember the exact year, but it was somewhere around that time, yeah.
Was there a formal contract under which you were retained to work for Harley?
No.
How were you remunerated?
There was a small retainer, and then everything else was commission based, which was based on a value on the contract value, on the order value, as it were.
As at 2013, what was that commission? Or what were the commission arrangements?
Well, I think it changed because I think originally, because for the first, 15 years or so of self-employment, I worked for multiple companies, not just Harley. So in the early days of Harley, they were doing much smaller jobs, so there was a sliding scale. I can't remember the exact detail because Ray and I go back a long way. That's Ray Bailey. So it was very much a sort of a handshake. But I, from memory, believe it was somewhere between 1% to 2.5% of the contract value, depending on what that value was. And I honestly can't remember those values. Later on, that changed because Harley's job size became larger. There was an agreement that it just became a straightforward 1%.
What commission did you earn on the
I think there was.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please continue.
There was on occasion, from memory again, I'm going that there may have been a lower percentage than one if margin was particularly tight or something like that. But yeah, on Grenfell, to answer your question, it was 1%.
1%. 1% of the total contract value to Harley.
That's 1% of the approximate £2.6 million, so it would have been £26,000.
Right. So is it fair to say that you generally had a strong incentive to find and bring in potential subcontracts for Harley?
Well, I think I'd have had the same incentive, whether it was commission-based or salary-based, because I'm still in the industry now on a salary and have the same incentive, so that's never changed.
I'd like to turn to the contract, which you describe in paragraph 12 of your statement. Can you please be shown that? HAR 30101559, page 3, please. And paragraph 12, at the bottom of the page there, you say, as I've indicated above, my involvement in the Grenfell Tower project was focused on the pre-contractual stage of Harley's involvement, which lasted around 18 months. I've had a number of emails shown to me which show that I was involved in the project between April 2013 and around April 2016. However, my main role was in securing Harley's involvement in that project in the months leading up to the issuing of a letter of intent by Ryden Limited, Ryden. Once this had been done, I handed over responsibility as the main point of contact at Harley to Daniel Anketel-Jones and Robert Maxwell. Is it fair to say that your role was focused on obtaining and negotiating a subcontract with whoever got the main contractor role for the cladding work on Grenfell Tower?
That's correct.
Sorry, Mr. Millett, give us pause a second. Can we have Mr. Harris back? Can I just ask the technical people that, as a rule, we want Mr. Harris on the screen all the time, unless he's actually being asked to look at a particular section of a document?
Yes, I think, Mr. Chairman, the document that I'm asking him to look at, he will need to speak to, and may need to have on the screen in front of him and us while he's giving his evidence. So it may not be possible to remove the document immediately I've shown it to him.
Well, I just want to check one thing before we go on. Mr. Harris, you, I think, will have in front of you a written copy of your statement. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So, just for Mr. Millett's benefit, he knows that you can read the relevant passage even if it's not on the screen. And I think it's important that we see you, Mr.
That's
Harris.
correct. I have that here in front of me. So.
Yeah, I think it's important that we see you when you're actually speaking to us and to the room at large and to those who are watching on other remote platforms. Now, I don't know whether that affects the way you ask your question.
No, it doesn't, Mr. Chairman, so far as his statement is concerned. But when it comes to documents which aren't in front of him in paper form...
Well, we'll deal with those as best we can.
Very shortly, I think. Can I ask you to look at paragraph 10 of your statement, page 3?
Okay. I'll have to put my glasses on to do that, if that's okay.
It can be put up on the system. Page 3, paragraph 10.
Okay,
You say
so-
there, in the second line, one route was to contact contractors and asked to be placed on their databases. Was Harley on Ryden's database?
Yes.
Do you remember when Harley got onto Ryden's database?
I don't, but it must have been prior to the Chalcott estate project. So at a guess, I don't know, 2000, the early 2000s, I couldn't be specific on an actual date.
Now, it's right to say that Harley never received a final formal written contract from Ryden for their work in relation to the Grenfell Tower project, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah.
Can I show you paragraph 27 of your statement at page 6?
Yep.
Now, you say there, and I'll again just wait so that that can come up on the screen for the public to see it. On the 25th of July 2014, I received an email from Zach Maynard of Ryden, which had a draft letter of intent, LOI, attached to it for the instruction of Harley as the cladding subcontractors on the Grenfell Tower project. That LOI authorised £30,000 of work in order to enable Harley to commence the design phase. Now, Is it right that the LOI you're referring to is the draft undated letter of intent between Ryden and Harley, which you received on the 25th of July 2014?
I believe that's correct, yeah.
I'll show you the document. It's HAR 50120. Is that the document?
Yes, it appears to be, yeah.
Thank you. Can we then look at RYD 3013524, page 1, please? 13524. This is an email to you of the 25th of July 2014. You can see from Zach Maynard at Ryden, copied to Simon Lawrence and Simon O'Connor, which attached the letter of intent and a series of appendices. That's when it came to you. Do you accept that?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, if I can show you paragraph 28 of your statement, page 7. You say there, on the 16th of September 2014, Zach Maynard sent Harley a further email in which he effectively extended the LOI to authorise the full scope of works quoted by Harley. In the end, Harley never received a formal subcontract but proceeded to complete the work on the basis of the terms set out in the LOI. And is this the email at, let me show it to you, HAR 4011069? Is that the email you're referring to?
Yes, it looks to be. Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Yes. Now, you say that Harley proceeded to complete the work on the basis of the terms set out in the LOI in your statement, which I've just shown you. Is it fair to say, therefore, that in the absence of a written contract, you understood the letter of intent effectively to define Harley's contractual responsibilities in relation to this subcontract?
Yes.
Can we look then at the letter of intent and ask you to go back, please, to HAR 50120? If you go to page 3, first of all, and then over to page 4, at the bottom of page 3, you'll see that Ryden say, we would be grateful if you could acknowledge your acceptance of the terms set out in this contract by signing and returning the enclosed duplicate by return. And you'll see that Ryden sign it under the hand of Simon Lawrence there. Now, we can't find any signed version of this document. Do you know whether this LOI was in fact ever signed by Harley?
I don't know is the honest answer. It wouldn't have been signed by me anyway, so it would have been signed by the managing director. So I honestly don't know.
It would have been signed by the managing director. So is that Ray Bailey?
Yes.
I'm sorry, was there an answer to that?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Can you explain why there was never any signed version?
No.
Now, you say at paragraph 28 of your statement, and I don't need to take you back to it, that Harley never received a formal subcontract. But it looks from this document that Harley did in fact receive a formal document signed by Ryden, but never signed it and sent it back. To the best of your recollection, is that correct?
I don't think the full contract ever arrived. This was a letter of intent, and then obviously the email that followed, extending the value of the letter of intent to the full contract value. But the actual contract itself, to my knowledge, never arrived. I would have to say that at that stage for Harley, having carried out 2 previous projects with Ryden, there was an established relationship, so we weren't too concerned at the time because under the letter of intent, work had started and Ryden were paying. So I think there was not a concern at that stage of having no contract in place, albeit that we did chase them up for the contract, but they never got it across to us. So yeah, we operated on a letter of intent, which is not the first time that happened. That's happened lots of times.
Right. In your last answer, you said something which I'm afraid was inaudible in this room to all of us, which you said you'd carried out 2 previous projects with Ryden and there was a something relationship. Can you just tell us what you said?
I think I said established relationship.
Established relationship, thank you. Yes. Now, let's just trace through briefly what happened in these negotiations. And I'll just pop some documents in front of you and we'll run through them. First, RYD 30s13679. 13679, please. This was an email under which you acknowledged receipt of the 25th of July letter of intent, and you say here you'd read through everything and send a formal acknowledgement in due course. And then if you go to RYD 30s14231, please. This is an email of the 31st of July 2014 in which you send Zach Maynard at Ryden a series of queries, as you can see there. So just looking at that, it looks like you did read through the documents and understand them and come back to him. I think the upshot at the end of that was that you were prepared to commit Harley to starting the design phase without a formal contract being in place because of what you call the long-term or established trading relationship. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Now let's go to RYD 30s16422. 16422. This is an email exchange between you and Zach Maynard between the 22nd or the 27th of August. It's a chain which starts at the bottom with the 31st of July email we've just looked at, runs up through the 22nd of August, comments below from Zach Maynard, and then at the top of the next one up, you ask him when the documents will be ready, and then Zach Maynard, 22nd of August, comments, and then 27th of August, all looks okay. I've confirmed the same below in blue for the record. When do you think the contract docs will be ready for issue? You see that? And if you go to RYD 30s16429, 16429, Zach Maynard comes back to you on the same day and says, Mark, thanks, we received our contract, capital C, yesterday, and Mr. Maynard told us that that was the main contract between Ryden and the TMO. So the letter of intent can be extended to your full order value. I will get official documentation out to you shortly. It appears you remain registered as self-billing on our system, etc. Is it right that as a result of that, Harley's design work thereafter proceeded?
Yes.
I think it's right to say, and you've told us earlier this morning, that you didn't in fact get the formal documentation that Zach Maynard promised.
Correct.
And therefore you sent a further email, as we can see, on the 16th of September 2014, HAR 401069. September from you to Zach Maynard, second email down, you see that. And you say there, in order to maintain programme, we need to place special dies and bar length material on order by the end of the week. As we stand, we only have authority for £30,000 of design. We will either need an increase in the value of the LOI or the subcontract in place as soon as possible, please. The approximate value of metal and dies is £325,000. And Zach Maynard replies saying, please treat this email as official confirmation that the letter of intent has been increased to the full value of your Appendix A ascertainment of lump sum price, £2.6 million. Despite Mr. Maynard's promise, I think it's right, and we've established, that there was no formal letter sent by Ryden to be signed by Harley and returned, was there?
That's correct.
And I think there were discussions about this draft, which we'll come back to, but you never actually signed any final formal contract. That's right.
That's correct.
Did Harley routinely, to your knowledge at the time, routinely enter into £3 million odd or £2.6 million odd pound contracts without signing a formal final written contract?
No, not as a rule. I think there are jobs that had started under a letter of intent. There's an awful lot of industry press about letters of intent and are they actually worth the paper they're written on, because a letter of intent could, in theory, reflect the main contract terms.
Right.
Letters of intent over the years, which are one-liners, and it really depends who you're dealing with and whether you have an established relationship as to how far you go on trust. In the case of Ryden, we were comfortable because of the established relationship that I touched on earlier, and we didn't see this as a concern.
Is that why you didn't chase up a formal signed contract executed by both Ryden and Harley?
Well, I think I had done, and what this won't record, obviously, is these phone calls that would have happened as well. I can't answer why Ryden didn't send it through. Maybe they were too busy. I really don't know. But I can't explain it.
Right. Just to push the point, you never chased up a formal signed contract from Ryden, did you?
Well, other than the emails that exist and phone calls that I had no way of proving.
Right. So far as Harley was concerned, so far as you were concerned, were you happy to proceed on the basis that the terms of the LOI, as agreed in July and August between you and Mr. Maynard, represented the final form of contract on the basis of which Harley was to provide its services?
Yes.
Now, let's just turn to the letter of intent itself. RYD 3013524. This was the letter of intent as amended later.
Yep.
And if we just go to that, there's the email. It's clear that there were some appendices, as we've seen. Now, the incorporation of those appendices wasn't changed by the amendments that we later saw, was it?
I don't believe so.
And it looks as if no Harley director or senior executive was involved in the negotiations. It was left really to you and Zach Maynard, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Did you get Harley board authority or Ray Bailey's authority, even informally, to conclude the LOI on these terms?
I would have done, yeah. I mean, Harley, as a business, was not a large company, so we were all in one office. So there were lots of, it was very easy to have verbal conversations from desk to desk, as it were. And I certainly would not have been doing that without authority.
Whose authority did you get to sign off on the LOI so far as you did?
I would have been Ray Bailey.
Right. Do you remember having a conversation with him about it, or are you just assuming that that's the case, doing the best you can?
Yeah, it's assuming it the best I can, because there were conversations of that kind all the time. So.
Right. Now, can I ask you to look at HAR 405899, please? This is an email sent from you, I think, to Simon Lawrence at Ryden on the 28th of July 2014.
Yeah.
Which was the Monday after the July letter of intent was sent. In other words, the first version of that before the discussion about the amendments to it. And you say, we are starting to receive emails direct from Bruce regarding detailing and product selection, etc. I wanted to check with you to ensure that we operate correctly with regards to contractual etiquette, whether this information should in fact be coming through Ryden. And then you go on in the next paragraph, but one, and say, obviously we have only just received the formal design order, so until we hold an internal handover, there is no Harley designer officially appointed to the job, hence we are in that in-between stage for a couple of days. We are intending holding a handover this week, probably Wednesday, but I'll write and let you know who'll be leading the design side immediately following handover. Would it be normal for no Harley designer to have been appointed up until the contract was concluded?
Yeah, I mean, there would be design involvement from often early stages, but no designer officially appointed to the project because we would not have been under instruction. So, they're through the process of the months before, when there would have been design things looked at, it could have been any number of different designers at Harley looking at things at any given time, but up to the point that you then, become officially under contract. At that point, there will be a team officially appointed to the job.
And when were you, do you think, officially under contract?
I think for me, it would be that we would start mobilising from the point of view of getting the original letter of intent.
I see. So 25th July onwards.
Yeah.
I see. So are you saying that from the 25th of July onwards, design was effectively starting?
Yes.
And that would mean that you'd need to have a designer involved?
Yes.
Who was the designer who was involved from the 25th of July?
I think it was probably Daniel, but I can't remember specifically. It could have been Mark, could have been Daniel, probably one of those two, I would think.
I see. Do you remember whether there was a delay in getting a designer onto the job following the receipt of the first draft of the letter of intent on the 25th of July?
Not sure.
Can I ask you to go to... I'm sorry, your answer was got down as inaudible, and I'm not sure I heard it. But I think I heard, not sure, but...
I can't recall whether there was a delay.
You can't recall. Okay. And can I ask you to look at RYD 3013922, please? We can see Mr. Lawrence's response to this query. And he says, "Hi, Mark. This is the 28th of July. Hi, Mark. As we've now done the deal, we can get going. I've told Bruce that it's now okay to contact you direct about design, but I'm to be copied in. I expect you to flag any design changes that have time and cost implications, so we don't over-design anything." Did you understand from this email that you are able to discuss design matters in particular, with Studio E, provided you were keeping Simon Lawrence copied in?
Yeah, that's fairly standard protocol. I think we always check those things out, that we get the authority from the main contractor. At the end of the day, we are in contract with Ryden, and we would need their authority. There's a protocol with these things. So prior to entering into dialogue with Studio E, we were just getting Ryden's authority to do that.
And in light of what you told us this morning, did the words that Mr. Lawrence used, "as we've now done the deal," indicate to you that, so far as you and he were concerned, Harley were now under subcontract to Ryden?
Yes.
Even though there were still amendments to be thrashed out?
Yes.
Yes. Did you pass Mr. Lawrence's instruction on to anybody else at Harley? Namely...
Well, they were all copied in, so...
Right. Well, we can see that Daniel was copied in. I assume that that's Daniel Anquetil Jones.
Correct.
At this stage, of course, Kevin Lamb hadn't been appointed, had he?
It looks that I had nothing. I don't know when Kevin came on board, but by the looks of that, he wasn't involved at that stage.
Do you remember whether Kevin Lamb was told that he had to keep Simon Lawrence copied in on any matters which he was discussing with Studio E?
No, I wouldn't have been involved in that.
All right. When Mr. Lawrence asked you to flag up any design changes that have time and cost implications, did you understand that the reverse was also true? In other words, that you didn't need to flag up any design changes that didn't have an implication in respect of time and cost?
I'm sure I quite understand the question there.
Well, let me try it a different way. You're told by Mr. Lawrence that to flag up any design changes that have time and cost implications. Did you understand from that that you only had to flag design changes that had time and cost implications, as opposed to all design changes?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Now, we can see that on the 31st of July, you sent an email to Simon Lawrence at HAR 5406, please, 5406. And you can see there that you say, "Hi Simon, lead designer will be Dan Anquetil Jones with brother Sam coordinating in the drawing office. We are yet to appoint a project manager, but Rob will advise on this in due course. Now that we are officially underway, I suggest that emails regarding the design phase are sent to Dan, but copied to Rob and Sam. I will deal with commercial items with Zach." So is it fair to say that the only thing that were outstanding, effectively, what you call the commercial items?
Yeah, I mean, commercial items that I would deal with are typically, with main contractors over the years, would typically be payment terms, retentions, liquidated damages, insurance details, those sort of things that I would deal with.
Yes. And you say lead designer will be Dan Anquetil Jones. Was there, or had there at that point been a meeting or discussion with Dan Anquetil Jones under which he was actually appointed?
There must have been an internal meeting, yeah.
Were you present at it?
I can't remember.
Were you told about it?
I can't remember, I'm afraid.
Can I just show you what Mr. Anquetil Jones says about that in his statement? HAR 3010149 at page 2, please. I want to show you paragraph 10.
Yeah.
He says, in respect to the Grenfell project, I was temporarily made lead Harley contact for Ryden, the main contractor. At the end of July / beginning of August 2014. This was because no one else was available. Ryden was told I was the project designer. However, this was only intended to reassure them whilst the project team was pulled together. My primary role was to appoint an external designer, as I did not have the capacity to take on, we can go over the page, the project. It was not unusual for Harley to bring in external designers to work on projects when there was not enough internal design resource, and this happened on a number of projects. Is what Mr. Daniel Anquetil Jones is saying there in his statement correct, so far as your recollection is concerned?
I think that's reasonably correct, yeah. I think I'll keep the answer short, but in the industry in which we work, workload is always uncertain. We can never be sure of what we're going to secure, and that's the world we live in. And because of that, you can't just have designers sat there doing nothing. So you have to use resource where you have to use it, and sometimes resource levels are not sufficient internally. So in the case of Grenfell, Kevin was brought on board. But in terms of how that was done, who was doing it, that will all have been matters for other people. I wasn't involved in the design office So I would have been involved in those decisions. But yeah, I think what Daniel says is relatively correct.
Why didn't you tell Simon Lawrence that Daniel Anketel-Jones was simply a stopgap while you found an external designer?
I probably wasn't told that.
Right. Is it fair to say that the reason that you hadn't yet appointed a project manager was that Harley was still looking at how to resource the project appropriately?
Yeah, I'm sure that's correct. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have been for me to appoint anybody to the job.
Right.
At that stage, there was a contracts manager, and that would have been for him to assess resource availability. So that would have been that situation then, right then.
Do you know what discussions regarding product specification were had between Ryden and Daniel Anketel-Jones during this temporary period that he describes?
Not specifically, no.
Is it fair to say that prior to the designer being appointed, any discussions regarding product specification were held by Ryden with you and Ray Bailey rather than with a Harley person with design qualifications?
It would have been, it would have been myself, Ray, the estimator at that stage. But if there were things that needed checking, it would not have been unusual for the technical manager to also have an involvement. It would have been, and of course the supply chain as well. So it's multiple people involved in that process.
Now, I want to turn to a slightly different topic, which is your initial involvement in the Grenfell Tower project, which goes back to early in 2013, so some 18 months in time before what we've just been looking at, Mr. Harris. Can I take you first to paragraph 11 of your witness statement, please, page 3? And you say there in the second sentence, second and third line, to the best of my recollection, Harley first became aware of the Grenfell Tower project when a fabricator called CGL Systems Limited, CGL, provided me with information about the project and about the possibility of being involved in the facade aspect of the project. CGL had been a supplier to Harley on previous projects, therefore there was already an established relationship. Now, just to be clear, CGL, I think Mr. Bailey told us during his evidence, was a fabricator. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct, yeah.
And they fabricated rain screen materials or products for use on Harley subcontracts.
They did. I think originally CGL was Composite Gutters Limited, so I think originally that's where they'd started life, but then developed their range of services over the years, which then incorporated cladding products.
Right.
So they weren't a manufacturer of sheet material, as it were, but they were a fabricator. And Harley, I can't remember the jobs, but Harley had certainly worked with CGL.
Now, can I look at the email to which you're referring? It's HAR 405352. This is an email from Jason Tisbury at CGL of the 25th of April 2013 to undisclosed recipients.
Yeah.
This was at a very early stage in the Grenfell Tower project, wasn't it?
Yes.
Was this the first time you had heard of the Grenfell Tower project?
I believe that's correct, yeah.
Right. Did CGL give you any further information beyond what we can see in this email?
I don't think so. I mean, it's quite commonplace for manufacturers or fabricators will be out in the marketplace themselves trying to create opportunity. So getting this sort of email is quite typical of what I receive during any given week. And the manufacturer or fabricator will have done a little bit of work, but then they're keen to pass it on to other people, such as Harley, for us to see whether we can develop it.
So I think the answer is no, CGL didn't give you any further information beyond what's in this email.
Correct.
Can can you please go to SEA 407603, please? This is an email you sent to Bruce Soanes of Studio E later the same day, 25th of April 2013. Dear Bruce, following up on the contact from Jason at CGL, this is a quick email to confirm our interest in the proposed overcladding scheme for Grenfell Tower. Overcladding tower blocks is very much what we do, and specifically in London, hence our keen interest in Grenfell. I've attached a small selection of tower block project info sheets and would welcome the opportunity of meeting up with you to talk through your requirements. I look forward to hearing from you. Would it be normal in your experience for you to reach out to an architect in this way?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that you were drawing attention to Harley's specialisation as a cladding subcontractor on this project?
Yes.
I don't think you got a response to this email from Mr. Soanes until September 2013, did you?
I can't recall.
Right. Now, we can see from this that you've attached a number of tower block project information sheets. Those included a range of projects, including the Chalcots estate.
Yep.
Can we just quickly turn up that? It's SEA 407605, please. Do you recall that this was one of the photographs or pieces of information that you sent? Yes. Why did you include these images this image of previous projects?
To show examples of other tower block projects that had been overclad.
And I think you also included information sheets for Clements Court, Hounslow, and Castlemaine Tower in Wandsworth.
Correct.
It's right, I think, that all three of those projects used ACM rain screen panels, didn't they?
Certainly Chalcot did, and certainly Clements Court did. I'd have to hesitate on the other project. It was probably ACM, but I can't actually remember.
Right. And is that because Harley had only done residential high-rise overcladding projects using ACM as rain screen material, and not, for example, zinc or rock panel?
Harley had predominantly used ACM. There were 4 blocks done in Croydon in a solid 3 millimetre aluminium cassette system, and that's not ACM. But I think all the others predominantly were ACM.
Right. So not zinc, not rock panel.
No, it had used zinc, but not on a tower block project, but never used rock panel.
Thank you. Can I ask you to go, please, to CEP 3049719? This is an email from Deborah French. Let's see. I'll wait a second till it comes up on the screen. This is an email from Deborah French of the 13th of May 2013 to Neil Wilson, Jeff Blades, and Roy Fuster at CEP, forwarding a BBC report referring to ACM in the UAE, and she attached a picture. I'll show this to you. She says, as you may be aware, there had been some reports via BBC concerning a fire on a building in UAE regarding ACM. As a business, we are aware of this report, and our technical team are following the details. But in the meantime, I wanted to add some thoughts that may help if you get questions from your customers, clients, etc. Regarding the supply of Reynobond in the UK, as you know, we supply both PE and FR core and can control and understand what core is being used in all projects due to the controlled supply route we have. By only supplying Reynobond to a very small group of approved fabricators and working very closely with them on all projects, we are able to follow what type of project is being designed and developed, and then offer the right Reynobond specification, including the core. At this stage, we will continue to offer both PE and FR core and continue the close working relationship we have with our approved fabricators to make sure the right technical support, Reynobond specification and materials are being used and installed on Reynobond projects. Many thanks for making me aware of the reports and for your continued support. Were you aware yourself at the time of high-rise fires in the UAE involving ACM?
No.
Were you made aware of this email or the contents of this email in any of your discussions with Jeff Blades or indeed anybody else at CEP?
Absolutely not.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? We didn't hear that.
Absolutely not.
Were you aware that the fire performance of ACM would or might differ considerably, depending on whether a PE or an FR core was used?
No.
Were you aware that Renault Bond ACM could be supplied with either a PE or an FR core?
No.
No. Right.
No.
I'll come back to that later on, but you weren't aware. Did you ever during the time of the project, did you ever become aware that Renault Bond ACM panels were available in either PE or FR?
No.
It would follow from that, I suppose, that you would never or did never have any discussions with Jeff Blades of CEP or Deborah French at Renault Bond about whether a PE or FR core should be used on Grenfell Tower. Is that right?
That's correct.
Moving on in time, moving back in time, can I show you HAR 3010160, please? This is a document called the Sales/Tender Progress Report.
Yep.
And I think it's generated or was generated by you, Mr. Harris. Is that right?
Correct.
Date initiated 1st of March 2013. Project name Grenfell Tower, Notting Hill, London Borough, Kensington and Chelsea.
Yep.
And you put the architect's name in there as well, Studio E. Can you describe the general purpose of this document?
Yeah, it's an internal document that I created for any project that we were pursuing. So saved onto the Harley server, you would find, I don't know, 200, 300, 400 of these. Only a small amount end up being projects that you secure, but there would be one of these for every project that we pursued, whether won, lost or otherwise, and it's available to everybody to view, and it's, for want of a better word, a diary of events through the sales pre-contract stage, and just my own notes. For example, it's an aid memoir in many ways, so that if you've spoken with somebody and then a month later you're having another conversation, I might just jot down some notes to remind me of what I said. So it's very much a diary. A diary.
So, to summarise it, does it represent a contemporaneous account of the discussions you were having as you had them?
Yeah, I mean, these I wouldn't say it's every single conversation. I was recording salient points, so there may have been 100 other phone calls, which were just quick phone calls between myself, Ryden, supply chain, which may not have been recorded, but the salient points would have been.
Now, we can see that the date of creation or initiation was the 1st of March 2013. And if we go to page 2, we can see the first entry on that date. ABI report found tower block refurb scheme very suitable for Harley. Drawings have been downloaded from planning portal. ABI states the name of the preferred contractor as Leadbitter. MAH, that's you, intro email sent to Colin Childs, project director at Leadbitter. So is it fair to say that, in fact, you became aware of this project even before being contacted by CGL in April, as we saw?
Yeah, it would appear so, that's correct, yeah.
So your evidence earlier that the first you heard of the project was when you got Jason Tisbury's email on the 25th of April 2013 is not correct, is it?
That's right.
Right, so we have to correct that. So can we take it then that actually the first you heard of this project was on the 1st of March. It says ABI report found. Were you looking for this project at that date? Or had you heard of it before then? Or
Sorry.
If we go back to page... I'm so sorry.
I would have been looking for projects generally. ABI is it's project data that you can buy. Any contractor can buy project data of projects that are typically found in the planning offices all over the country. And I would have been looking for typically tower block type schemes, and then Grenfell would have appeared.
I see. And how soon before the 1st of March would Grenfell have appeared on your radar, as it were? Or was it on the 1st of March?
On my radar, it probably would have been the 1st of March, if that's my first note.
Okay. Can you go back to page 1 and look at your initial assessment? Towards the bottom of that page, you say, this is a firm Harley lead. What was it that gave you the impression that this project, even at that stage, was a firm Harley lead?
Because we'd found it. In fact, I was incorrect earlier with Jason Tisbury, which if he would have introduced it to us, it would have been a lead introduced to us by CGL. But in this case, clearly I'd found it myself, so it was a Harley lead rather than an external lead.
I see what you mean. But you say firm Harley lead. What does that mean?
Well, it's just a word, isn't it? I mean, you could remove that. It's a Harley lead.
I see. So you found it rather than anybody else. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
I see. You then go, we can move on, I think, in the document to the 23rd of August, 2013. Page 2, please. And it says there, after a gap of some 4 months, OJU notice appeared on ABI update. This project appears to be live again and has been advertised for tender. MAH email sent to Jonathan Rowlands at Ryden to ask if they are applying. What prompted you to ask Ryden if they were applying?
Because we'd worked with them on other tower block projects. They were very active in that market. So I wanted to see whether they were interested in this project as well. And I guessed or assumed at the time that they would also be tracking it.
So does this tell... I see. Did you send any messages to any other potential main contractors to ask if they were applying?
Don't recall doing that.
Right. So is that because Ryden were a main contractor with whom you worked particularly closely historically?
Yes.
We then see shortly afterwards an entry dated the 12th of September. You see that? MAH email received from Bruce Soanes at Studio E Architects in response to MAH email back in April. He advised that the scheme is due out to tender during November, and he would appreciate assistance with material options, costs, and technical details. This is integral to de-risking the project. And I think we can see the email there. It's SEA 408375, please. It's in fact dated the 11th of November 2013, the day before you made your note of the tender report. And he tells you, Dear Mark, the Grenfell project is moving again, and I would like to arrange a meeting with you or someone from Harley to discuss options, costs, and technical details. This is integral to us de-risking the project, which will be tendered sometime in November. We're not the easiest place to get to, so I'm happy to travel. There's a slight difference between the email and your note. He says options, and your note says material options. Is that how you read his email? That when he said options, he meant options in respect of materials?
Yes.
What did you understand Mr. Soanes to mean by de-risking the project?
I'm not sure.
What information or assistance did you understand you would be required by Mr. Soanes to give him in respect of options, costs and technical details?
These sort of meetings are quite typical. In fact, I've had one pretty much identical in the last 2 days. So these sort of things go on all the time where, because at this stage it hasn't gone out to tender, there's no main contractor involved. At this stage, Studio E would have been working for the client, and the client will have presumably a cost planner somewhere, and they're trying to get to a situation where they want to work out what the options are, what can be done, and they're after some guides, really. So contractors such as Harley and lots of others provide high-level information, is what I would call it at this stage, budgetary advice, and that typically is based on other things you've done historically, because that's where it would come from.
Yes. And your motive was to assist, to try to put Harley in as good a position as it could be for being appointed the cladding subcontractor by the main contractor when the tender came about?
Yeah, it's a foot in the door, yeah.
Foot in the door. And did you understand that Studio E was seeking Harley's specialist expertise and advice on these matters and would rely on Harley's input?
Yeah, I didn't think for a second it would only be Harley, and we know they were talking to other people, but yeah, we felt that was part of the process, yeah.
Now, moving forward in time, can we go to paragraph 14 of your statement, please, page 4? And you say there, para 14, page 4, having been initially told about the Grenfell Tower project by CGL, I think we have to correct that. Our first meeting with anyone formally involved in the project was in September 2013 when Ray Bailey and I met Bruce Soanes and Thomas Reck of Studio E Architects Limited. This was a fairly informal initial meeting at a restaurant in Hayes Galleria in London. This was very early on in the planning and design process. The project had not yet been put out to tender, and planning approval had not yet been obtained for Studio E's designs, although I believe that planning approval was obtained shortly thereafter. Did you discuss the strategy that you were going to adopt with Ray Bailey at the meeting with him beforehand?
I don't think so, no. I think it was just one of many meetings we'd have attended of that nature, and at that stage it could have been a one-off, never to be revisited, so,
right.
And there wasn't strategy.
Can we look at SEA 408692, please? This is an email from Thomas Reck of Studio E to you on the 25th of September 2013, forwarding a number of preliminary drawings in advance of the meeting, which took place 2 days later on the 27th of September. Do you remember what you did on receipt of these documents?
I don't, but I imagine I would have circulated them internally, because it would be me assessing that type of information. So that could have been Ray, could have been the technical manager, probably the estimator. So yeah, I would have shared that information internally.
And the technical manager was who? Was that Mark Stapley?
No, that would have been Dan Anketel-Jones.
Oh, I see. So you think Dan Anketel-Jones would have seen these, and the estimator, that's Mike Alberston, isn't it? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I can't swear that they saw them, but okay. That's typically what would happen.
All right. Do you remember, therefore, that everybody at Harley who was discussing or involved in this project at this time would have been aware that Grenfell Tower was a building over 18 metres in height?
Yes.
I want to turn then to the subject of the cladding, and particularly ACM. At paragraph 15 of your statement, at page 4, you describe the Hayes Galleria meeting. I just want to show you what you say there. Paragraph 15, page 4. You say the designs at that stage were based on cladding Grenfell Tower in zinc, and I believe Studio E had already spoken to a number of suppliers of zinc cladding products. However, I believe that we had some discussion at that stage about choice of materials. Harley had worked on a number of other projects where we had used other types of cladding materials, including ACM cladding. ACM is lightweight, available in an extensive range of colours, and can achieve an aesthetic finish, often preferred by architects and clients, because it achieves a flat appearance when viewed from any angle. I believe we showed Bruce and Thomas a Harley brochure which contained examples of other projects Harley had worked on, many of which featured ACM cladding. I know both from the work Harley had undertaken and from my general experience in the industry that ACM was widely used, and it had never been suggested that there were any safety issues in relation to using ACM products. Now, who at the meeting initially introduced the idea of ACM cladding as an option for Grenfell Tower?
I honestly can't remember, but we had with us a Harley brochure, and we were flicking through the pages, and my recollection is, as we came across different projects, such as Ferrier Point and so on, the question would then ask, what did you clad those in? So ACM came up as part of the conversation.
I see. As part of that conversation, did you discuss the two different systems, face fixed or cassette?
I can't remember whether we did, but quite possibly.
Now, can I ask you to look at ART 401487? This is an email of the 27th of September, very shortly after that meeting, from Bruce Soanes to Phil Booth of Artelia, ART 401487, and others at the TMO. He says, we met with Harley Curtain Wall this morning to discuss the project. They are very keen and have been tracking the project for some time. They are specialists in this type of project. They pointed to Ferrier Point as being very similar to Grenfell, although it's triple glazed and super insulated. We'd forwarded them sample details and the elevation measures beforehand. And then at paragraphs 1 and 2, at 1 he talks about your back of a fag packet budget based on the areas is around £3 million. Do you remember that discussion?
Yes.
And at paragraph 2 he says their recurring experience is that budgets force clients to adopt the cheapest cladding option, aluminium composite material, ACM face fixed. We have offered to forward a more detailed takeoff so that they can provide a more accurate budget. A zinc composite panel is also available, which is cheaper to install than a cassette. Just on what I've shown you so far, does this email accord with your recollection of what was discussed at the meeting?
Yeah, I think so, generally speaking. Obviously, we wouldn't know details of their budget, having said that. I mean, he's referencing their Stage D budget. We wouldn't have had access to that information.
No, I understand that. Was it your understanding? Well, let me ask this. What impression was given to you at the meeting in respect of the flexibility about the material choices at this stage?
I think we felt it was as flexible as it ever is. I mean, when people are looking at options, I mean, going through the Harley brochure, we would have made it clear that as an envelope contractor, we have installed many different things, and zinc would have been in there, terracotta, solid aluminium, all sorts of different things, but more predominantly ACM. But yeah, as an envelope contractor, we are there to provide a service, and when we're asked the question, what have you used, we would have gone through all of those options as part of that discussion. But equally, we had used zinc in the past, and if they wanted us to use zinc on this job, we would have used it.
Did you express, or did Mr. Bailey express any preference for any type of product or any finish at this meeting?
I think all we would have said is that we'd used ACM on more tower blocks than anything else. I think that's probably what we would have said.
Right. Mr. Soanes records you as saying, as I've shown you, their recurring experience is that budgets force clients to adopt the cheapest cladding option, aluminium composite material, ACM face fixed. Was that in fact your experience?
Yes, it still is now. In 32 years of doing this job, I can't think of a job where budget is always an issue. I just can't remember in 32 years when budget hasn't been an issue.
So when you say I can't think of a job where budget is always an issue, I think you mean is never an issue.
Yes.
Yes. You can't think
sorry.
of yes. You can't think of a job where budget is never an issue. I understand. Did you understand that Studio E would have been relying on Harley to present material options for materials that were suitable for use on Grenfell Tower, and only to do so, and not to present you with options, not to present them with options that were unsuitable for use on Grenfell?
Yes, I think that would follow.
At the time that ACM was raised as an alternative option to zinc, do you know what assessment had been done by you or by anyone else at Harley to determine whether ACM was a material choice for Grenfell Tower which complied with statutory requirements and industry guidance?
I think that would have been based on an assumption, really, that because Harley had worked on multiple other tower block projects with ACM cladding, which would have been through a process of being assessed for suitable for those projects by all stakeholders, why would it be any different on Grenfell Tower?
So does it follow from that that there were no specific discussions between you and Studio E at this meeting about whether ACM cladding was suitable for a building of the height of Grenfell Tower?
No.
Would you agree with me with this proposition, that of all the professionals working on the overcladding of Grenfell Tower, Harley were in the best position as a specialist cladding subcontractor to make an assessment of whether any of the materials used in the cladding system at Grenfell were compliant with statutory requirements and industry guidance?
Well, I don't know that Harley were best placed. I think Harley were one of a number of organisations that would have made that assessment. Harley were not the manufacturer of the material, were not the fabricator of the material, not the designer of the facade. So, no, that wouldn't just fall to Harley.
But Harley were well placed to do so nonetheless, weren't they?
I think Harley were well placed to give advice based on past experience, yes.
Based only on past experience, or based on technical expertise?
I think on past experience and technical expertise learned from those past jobs.
Do you remember whether there was any discussion at this Hayes Galleria meeting in respect or about the material for the insulation?
I don't recall it.
Can I just show you what Mr. Soanes says about that?
Yes.
First of all, SEA 30142773, paragraph 271 of Mr. Soanes' inquiry witness statement. It's at page 114. And he says there, when I met Harley, I believe I had a lingering uncertainty about PIR because this was a high-rise and I had not been involved in a high-rise before. I believe, but I cannot say for sure, that I asked Ray Bailey a question about the acceptability of using rigid foam insulation on a high-rise building, probably at the end of the meeting. If I did, I don't recall he provided a definitive response. Do you recall Mr. Soanes raising this query at this meeting?
No.
Now, Mr. Soanes was asked about this in his examination by Miss Grange QC on day 20. I just want to show you the transcript of that. That's day 20, page 47, please. Yes, thank you. And on page 47, I think we're on page 27. We need page 47. That's it. Lines 3 to 15. We can see the question and the answer. Mr. Soanes said, I believed I asked him about the acceptability of using a rigid foam, and I might not have mentioned it was Celotex. We did discuss insulation in the round because we discussed the assembly of the facade, the sequence, how it would all be supported. So in a general sense, we did discuss insulation. On reflection, I believe one of the reasons I might have been prompted to ask, not just any kind of lingering uncertainty, but I think we were shown several pictures of the Ferrier Point Tower under construction. Of those in progress construction, you could quite clearly see where the insulation was mineral wool. And then he says at line 17, that's in hindsight. Now, do you recall Mr. Soanes asking about the acceptability of using a rigid foam insulation on high-rise buildings?
I don't, I'm afraid.
Did you show Mr. Soanes pictures of the Ferrier Point Tower under construction?
I may have done. It wouldn't have been unusual for me to have done something like that.
Do you remember what Mr. Soanes was told about the Ferrier Point project at that meeting?
I'm afraid I don't.
Can I ask you to look at SEA 403497? 3497. SEA 403497. Do you remember whether you showed Mr. Reck and Mr. Soanes this picture at that meeting?
I don't recall showing it to them, but as I said, it wouldn't have been unusual for me to have done something like that. So I may well have done, but I can't specifically remember.
Would you agree with me that it's clear from that these images show there's mineral wool insulation being applied to the building?
It appears to be, yeah.
Yes. It's clear from that, isn't it, do you think?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't prompt any recollection that you had a discussion about whether the insulation to be used should be mineral wool or rigid foam?
No, sir. No, it doesn't.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I think that's probably an appropriate moment to take the morning break.
Yes, very well, thank you. Well, as I said to Mr. Harris, we're going to have a break during the morning. We'll take it now. I think we'll take just over 15 minutes. So I'm going to ask you to be ready to resume at 20 to 12, please. And it's very important that I say this to you, that you should not discuss your evidence or any aspect of the matters which you're being questioned about while we're in the course of the break. Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll look forward to seeing you again at 20 to 12.
Okay, sir. No
Good.
problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, 20 to 12. Thank you. Right. Hello again, Mr. Harris.
Hello, sir.
Yes, you ready to carry on?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Pitt.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Harris, can I go back to an answer you gave earlier this morning, which is at page 45 of the transcript, where I asked you whether, of all the professionals working on the overcladding of the Grenfell Tower, Harley were in the best position as a specialist cladding subcontractor to make an assessment of whether the materials used in the cladding system were compliant. And you said in your answer that Harley were not the manufacturer of the material, were not the fabricator of the material, and were not the designer of the facade. Now, when you say you were not the designer of the facade, that's not right, is it? Harley was the designer of the facade. That was one of the services that it was providing within its scope of work provided under the LOI, wasn't it?
Yeah, Harley's design works are limited to once a decision has been made on a material that's specified, any facade contractor, their responsibility is to make those components fit the building. So they're not designing the concept of the visual look of the building. It's a matter of making those components fit the building.
But I'm so sorry. I interrupted you.
No, that was it, really.
Right. But do you accept that as part of its contractual obligations in providing its services, Harley was contracted in to design the facade? That was part of its contract.
It was part of the contract, but yes, but that sounds like a blanket statement. It's specifically designing, it's limited to taking the specified materials and getting them to fit on the building, because obviously at that stage there's a building sat there that needs cladding, and you have to clad it with materials that have been selected. So there has to be the associated design to make that fit, make it work, and that would be the hardest part.
Can you and I agree perhaps this far, that when one needs to understand what the scope of Harley's design obligations was, we can tell that by looking at the letter of intent and the related documents. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Now, can I go back then to the email we were looking at earlier, HAR 405992, page 1. This is an email sent by Bruce Soanes that we saw earlier after the 27th of September meeting.
Yep.
And he says to you, Dear Mark, Ray, thank you very much for the conversation this morning. It was very useful, and I'm especially grateful you could come into London. We will follow up early next week with a quantity takeoff from our model. I've communicated your quotes, back of a fag packet quotes figure to the QS, and it is over budget, which is to be expected, but some firmer budgets will help focus everyone's minds. Just pausing there in the email, what did you understand him to mean by focus everyone's minds?
I assume he means focus everyone's mind on the budget.
Yes. Were you concerned at that stage that your estimated costs appeared to be too high?
No, because it was high-level budget.
When you gave the quote of approximately £3 million, as we saw in the earlier email, did that include the estimated costs of designing, procuring and installing the whole facade?
Yes.
Does that, in parlance, equate to an on-the-wall price?
Yes.
Right. Now, he goes on to say, we're looking seriously at NedZinc's composite panel. The small sample we have in the office looks like a Luco bond, but is apparently zinc. Is it fair to say that initially the architect's preference was for a zinc cladding product?
Yes.
Did you express any concerns to Mr. Soanes that it would be challenging to provide zinc within the budget that he was indicating?
Probably not at that stage.
Right. Now, after that meeting, on the 4th of October 2013, we can see that Studio E requested information and costings from a NedZinc product. Can we look at HAR 405461, please? 5461. And he comes to you and says, Mark, the takeoff from Revit has proven less than straightforward. And then in the third paragraph, the client's response to your budget was, what about aluminium? We haven't had samples or cost back from NedZinc, but this could be ideal if it eliminates the need for fabricated trays and is true zinc. And then he gives you the NedZinc link. We are looking at alley planks trays to the lower 4 floors to achieve the colour gradation. Would it be possible to come back with the budget budget costs, or would the material cost uplift? What would the material cost uplift be for a Nova composite versus a metallic faux zinc Raynabond panel? Now, I want to focus on the NedZinc request. What efforts did you go to obtain pricing for the NedZinc product that Mr. Soames had asked for?
I believe we emailed or spoke and emailed to the manufacturers to try and obtain prices for their product.
Can you go to HAR 405997? This is an email from you to Bruce Soames, dated the 18th of October 2018, copy to Ray Bailey. And you attach a budget, the 18th of October, Harley budget costs submitted, external cladding PDF. Now, we'll come back to that. Hi, Bruce, apologies for the delayed response. We've put a budget spreadsheet together which is based on using the Raynabond natural zinc product fabricated into cassettes as a starting point. See that? We've included, and you go on to say, we've included 3 other options on bottom of the attached spreadsheet showing the effect on the overall budget if we were to consider face-fixed natural zinc and then going to a standard aluminium ACM in both cassette and face-fixed. And then you go on to say the most expensive option is obviously the natural zinc cassettes. If standard ACM was to be considered in a zinc colour, face fixed, the saving could potentially be over £500,000. Now, the budget included, I think, 4 options for savings, didn't it?
Yes.
You didn't include pricing for the NedZinc Nova composite product that the architects had requested, did you?
No, I think my recollection is that we were struggling to get prices at the time. I know eventually we did because our tender was eventually based on that product.
Right.
But they were a bit slow in the early stages.
I see. Now, you say you were struggling to get prices. You go on to say, as I've shown you, the most expensive option is zinc. And then in the last paragraph, you go on to say, as said when we met, we have a number of examples of high-rise residential blocks in London where standard aluminium face-fixed ACM was used. We can forward some photo images or arrange site visit as and when required. Why did you volunteer these savings before being invited to provide them as part of an overall budget?
That's a fairly standard thing to do. This is when people are just looking at all possible options. We want to be helpful.
Why did you highlight the fact that the standard ACM panel face fix provided a potential saving of over £500,000?
Just doing my job at the time, just saying what the options were.
And you, as we can see, also highlighted the fact that Harley had a number of high-rise residential buildings in London which had used ACM and offered to provide photographs and site visits. Looking at this email in the round, Mr. Harris, is it fair to say that you are actually pushing Raynabond ACM, or at least ACM, pretty hard?
Yeah, I think we were, as you have to remember, this is pre-fire at Grenfell. So at that stage, from Harley's point of view, having successfully completed multiple projects with this same product, as far as we were concerned, it was a good product for that application, as of course hundreds of others did all over the UK and throughout the world. So we weren't sitting there thinking anything but this is a really good product for this application and may prove a good solution for Grenfell Tower.
is the answer to my question yes, that you were pushing Renault Bond ACM, or at least ACM, pretty hard?
No, I think we were advising of ACM as an option.
All right. Now let's look at the budget you attached to the email. It's SEA 402275. 2275. Was it you who drew this up?
It was more likely to have been the estimator, I believe.
What, Mike Albiston?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
It may have been, but it's more likely to have been him. So I couldn't absolutely categorically say it wasn't me, but looking at that document, that's more likely to have been him.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with Mike Albiston or any input into its creation?
I'm sure there were discussions, yeah.
Did you see this document before it went to Bruce Soanes?
I'm sure I would have done.
You can see that although it refers to insulation in I think 3 places here, this document doesn't specify what product is to be used, but you've got prices for them.
Yeah, I think in terms of insulation. Sorry, go on.
Can I just ask the question, what was the insulation product on which you based those prices?
That would have probably have been a generic cost, because a lot of insulations are very similar in terms of cost. And at that stage, we were at high level budget stage, so it didn't need to be any more specific than that.
Can you help me when you look at the third item down? Renault Bond, zinc, rain screen, spandrel, cladding and insulation with a total net cost of £573,000. How much of that would have been the insulation?
At that stage, I would say insulation was probably anywhere between about, I don't know, £15, £20 a square metre, something like that. So it was a minor component.
I see. So do I take from that answer that you added a ballpark generic figure based not on a particular product, but just on your experience of insulation products generally?
Correct, yeah.
By generic, were you including or excluding PIR products?
It wasn't including anything. It was just a generic cost.
Right. On the final page, last page of the document, page 3, please, we can see that there are 3 alternative options for cladding. Cladding meaning rain screen there, I think.
Yeah.
And the savings that you would set out. It's right, isn't it, that, as we can see, each of those is Renault Bond?
Yes.
Why were you only proposing Renault Bond rain screen products rather than any other ACM cladding brands?
It could have been equally other ACM brands in there. I think from a Harley point of view, we'd had a stronger, more established relationship with the guys on the Renault Bond side, so we based it on Renault Bond, but it could have been something else.
What else could it have been?
It could also have been a Alcoa Bond. They were the main 2. Historically, it's really been those 2. Nowadays, there are many more bonds on the market, but historically, with the strong brands were Alcoa Bond and Renault Bond.
Why did you not put Alcoa Bond prices in as well, so that Mr. Soanes could see the full choice?
Probably wouldn't have been much different in cost.
Well, that would have been a matter for him to decide, wouldn't it?
Maybe.
So why didn't you put Alcoa Bond options there, as well as Renault Bond?
No good reason. Just there's some options that are on the table. It's up to the client to come back and ask us if they want something outside of that. We table something, and then it's for them to consider it and say whether they like what we've tabled or they want more options. Because otherwise we could have 50 options.
Was it your aim to get Renault Bond ACM included in the NBS specification for this project as one of the rain screen options?
No, that wasn't for us. That wasn't a decision for us.
does it follow from what you're saying, at least this much, that your strong preference for this project was Renault Bond ACM cladding, which is why it appears as the only option as an alternative to zinc in this budget?
No, I think Harley had proved over the years that it had used multiple products, including Alcoa Bond. So this was, as it says at the top, option. And if another option had been chosen, then that would be fine also.
But you were the one providing the options to Studio E. If you weren't pushing Renault Bond ACM, why not put Alcoa Bond in there and get them to choose?
Well, we could have done it, but we didn't.
And I'm suggesting to you that the reason you didn't was because your strong preference was for Renault Bond to the exclusion of any other product.
Don't agree with that, because this is at budget stage. We were just offering some options at budget stage. This always develops from that, where people then come back and ask different questions, as they did throughout this process.
Can you explain how you arrived at these prices or these savings on these three Renault Bond products?
I believe that was based on historic cost data, because the company had used Renault Bond on multiple projects. It had cost data available, so we didn't need to go and talk necessarily to external sources to be able to put these early budget figures together.
Did you in fact talk to Alcoa, who make Renault Bond or made Renault Bond, to get these specific prices?
Yeah, there was dialogue with Alcoa through this process, because the architect started looking at his focus through this whole process was appearance and colour and so on and so forth, which is why we ended up with a full mock-up.
Yeah. Let me ask the question again. Did you in fact get these specific prices from Alcoa at the time, or were you relying on your historic knowledge of these prices?
I can't honestly remember. It could have been some and some, but typically we would rely on historic data. Unless we didn't have that data, then we would have asked the manufacturer for guidance.
Let's move on with the story. We can see Mr. Jones's response to this document at HAR 406007, please. 6007. And he comes back to you same day, second email down. If we can just look at that. Mark, thank you for the spreadsheet, very useful indeed. And he then says, the Renault Bond natural zinc is VM zinc quartz, which we discussed. I don't think it's an option. Could you give an indication, the premium we would have to pay for the Ned zinc data sheet attached versus a standard ACM? I'm worried your standard is white and entirely unfeasible. We received the following guidance from Paul Cousins at SIG Zinc and Copper. And then he cuts and pastes that into the email, and you can see the prices for Proteus Ned Zinc Nova Composite, and Ned Zinc interlocking. A face fix solution would be acceptable, so I hope we will be at the low end, £90 per square metre. Don't need the rest of that email. We can see your response later the same day at the top of the page, please. Hi Bruce, I've spoken to Paul, and the reason he's applied such a wide price band is because he doesn't know panels, sizes, configurations, or joint sizes. I believe he is meeting next week, etc. And then halfway down the email, you say, if I was to take worst case scenario and feed £150 per square metre panel cost into our spreadsheet, the overall on-the-wall rate for Ned Zinc would certainly be higher than the Renault Bond natural zinc. However, I would prefer to get more accurate rates from Paul before committing ourselves to actual budget costs. We can hopefully do that next week, assuming Paul provides the information. Is it fair to say that you are, again, promoting Renault Bond products as more appropriate than others, this time by reference to budget?
No.
You don't accept that?
No.
Well, can I ask you then to look at HAR 405996, please? This is an email from you to Ray Bailey at the top of the page, FYI, 25th of October 2013. And you say there, it looks like our old mates at Studio E are now referring all manufacturers to us on Grenfell. Can't be bad. Might need to get Rebecca to knock up a SketchUp model before too long. Is it fair to say that in forwarding inquiries from cladding manufacturers directly to Harley, Studio E were letting you take the lead on the selection of materials on this project?
They were happy for us to assist them, yes, because at that stage it's free advice.
So happy for you to assist them is a bit of an understatement. You were essentially taking the lead in assisting them or advising them on what products were suitable for the project.
We were responding to requests.
Now, you, I think, as we've seen, were tasked with obtaining quotes from a range of cladding manufacturers, one of which was KME. That's right, isn't it?
Correct.
And they, KME, were the manufacturers of the zinc Proteus panel. That's right,
Yes.
That's right, isn't it? Can I ask you to look at SIG 50233, please? This is an email of the 25th of October 2013 from SIG, or SIG, to Studio E. And it's to Thomas Reck from Simon Walker, where we can see that, as he says, Thomas Matthew Irving of KMEAS has made contact with Mark and will provide budgets to Harley next week. I think you're the Mark in that email, aren't you?
That looks correct, yeah.
Yes. And then if we... yes, yeah, the question is, what efforts did you go to price the Proteus panel?
I can't remember at that stage, but obviously eventually that was the basis of our first tender to all the main contractors. So there must have been a reasonable amount of dialogue with these people.
If you go to SEA 409658, please. This is an email from you, 9658, SIG 340s, sorry, SEA 409658. We can see in this email chain, let's just go to the bottom of it and work our way up from the bottom. We can see that on the 1st of November, Mark Harris, sent an email to Studio E. If we can look at the bottom of that email chain, the whole chain, so I think, in fact, extends to page 3. Right, actually, we need to go further back in time, and I'm sorry about that. So we can see how this rolls through. That's page 5. We go up the email chain to page 4. Studio E, it seems, are in touch with Simon Walker at SIG about zinc. And if you go up to the next email up, he says to Simon Walker, "Afternoon, Simon. With regards to the new rain screen cladding, we are liaising with Mark Harris from Harley, who are envelope installers. You can find his details below. And you're copied in on that. And then the next one up, you go back to him, 25th of October. Many thanks for keeping me in the loop. and then Thomas Reck on the 29th of October sends you an email about zinc cladding. You see that? I don't think I need the detail of that, and he asks at the end, BTW, have you heard from SIG about the prices? You see that?
Yes.
And then moving on in time, if we move up to page 2, we can see an email from you to Thomas Reck of the 1st of November. Please see an extract below of the email received from CGL with regard to wall planks. We don't need that. And then there's a different type. You say, we've recently supplied zinc wall plank to Tesco in Woolwich at ground level. Successfully gained the robustness needed. Zinc is a soft material. It will always suffer if vandalism occurs. However, due to its natural patination properties, scuffs, etc., will generally fade over time. Dents, however, would mean replacement of panels. And then Thomas Reck comes back to you 1st of November and says, hi, Mark, thank you for this. Yes, please ask them about aluminium panels rather than zinc. I've spoken to Simon Walker of SIG. He will speak to Matt Irving. Did you catch up with Matt? And that's at 11:32. And then the next email up, you say to him, Thomas, I sent Matt an email 30 minutes ago chasing up progress. I'll keep you posted. You can see that?
Yes.
And if we just move up the chain, please. Move up the chain, please. This is now the 4th of November, where Thomas Reck comes to you and says, morning, Mark, any luck with contacting Matt Irving? Thanks, regards, Thomas. And you go back to him, same day, in the evening, 17:16. Hi, Thomas, no joy on the KME front. I've called the head office number, his mobile, and emailed him, all with zero success. KME clearly don't want the business. And then Thomas Reck to Bruce Sains, Bruce, as you said, see below. You don't need that. Now, I've shown you that email chain. We can see from it that you told Thomas Reck on the 4th of November that you chased KME on the 1st of November and the 4th of November. And you say you called his office mobile and emailed him with no success, and then made a conclusion that KME clearly don't want the business. Let me just show you in an interim a document at SIG 50246. This shows that you had chased Matt, the email you said you'd sent, on the 1st of November. It's the second email down on that page at 11:01 on that day. Hi, Matt, any news on the budget price for Grenfell Tower? And then on the 7th of November, Matt Irving responds to your chaser email of the 1st of November, providing budgets for Proteus HR. Mark, budgets below for Proteus HR, composite honeycomb panels only. And he attaches the preliminary guidance notes and gives a price of £115 per square metre, X works, panels only. You see that? And he says, I will call you today to run through the general details. Can we then turn on to HAR 30010172, please, at page 3? This is an email from you to Thomas Reck of the 7th of November, same day. I'm sorry, an email to Bruce Soanes, the 7th of November. And you say, a response has, good morning, Thomas. It's actually addressed to both of them, clearly. A response has been received at last from KME, although I'm not sure it tells us a great deal. All that's been provided is a base square metre rate for panel-only X works. That must have taken all of 10 minutes to think about, so quite why it's taken them 2 weeks to provide it is a mystery to me. Just pausing there, would it be usual for the manufacturers of a panel to include a quote for more than the panels themselves?
No, I think what I'm referring to there is that they've obviously just taken a rate that they could have probably provided in half an hour. If they would have taken 2 weeks, you would have kind of suspected a bit more detail. They obviously have provided that detail.
Well,
I can't.
Sorry, I'm so
Go on.
sorry. What else other than a price X works would you expect a manufacturer to provide?
Well, I wouldn't expect it to be X works for a start, because we would never be going up there to pick the materials up. You'd want them delivered, and if we'd have provided, or they would have had details of elevation drawings, so you'd have expected a bit more thought, because any panel manufacturer would be looking at typically wastage is one of the big things, because they'll have sheet material out of which they have to produce panels, so there'd be a wastage factor. And they obviously hadn't considered any of those things, or certainly that's how it appeared.
Why were you surprised to receive a price which was X works, given that that is the price, even though it may include the matters you're referring to, that was being quoted?
I don't think I've ever seen a price X works. It's got to get to site somehow. We would never be picking it up, so I don't know why anyone would quote X works.
In fact, isn't it fair to say that KME actually provided rather more information than simply a price for the Proteus panel? They'd included fairly detailed information in the attachment and had offered to follow up with a call, hadn't they?
Yeah, I think they had, yeah.
Now, we don't see you forwarding on the email from Mr. Irving, Matt Irving, itself to Studio E. That's right, isn't it?
If that's what it is, that's what it is, yeah.
Why didn't you do that?
I know.
You didn't tell Studio E what the rate provided by KME actually was for this product, did you?
Well, I wouldn't tell them the rate from KME, because they wouldn't be paying that rate. That will be Harley paying that rate, onto which there will be a cost build-up of lots of other elements to give an on-the-wall price. So it's pointless giving somebody a price just for material.
And you didn't provide Studio E with the attachments to the email either, did you?
I have no idea. If that's what it is, that's what it is, yeah.
And you go on to explain in your email, all I've been able to do with this extremely limited information is to take a best guess at wastage, transport and support rail costs, in addition to design and installation, and input into our spreadsheet to give an end figure on the wall. And the result was Proteus HR composite, and we can see the price, £282 per square metre. Now, we've already seen that the price for the Proteus panel X works that Mr. Irving was quoting you was £115 per square metre.
Yeah.
But here we see you providing an on-the-wall price, in other words, an all-in, all-inclusive price to Mr. Rec at Studio E of £282 per square metre. That's more than double the rate that KME had given you, isn't it?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all.
Well, how did you reach that price?
Well, on top of his price for panels, there would have to be the substructure behind it, insulation, installation, project management, and overhead and profit. So there'd be a whole cost build-up to go behind that, or after that, rather.
And is it fair to say that you didn't provide Studio E with those calculations and assumptions in reaching that gross price?
Absolutely not.
And just help us why that is.
That's our business, not theirs.
So you put a build-up on an X-Works price of £115 per square metre and get to £282 per square metre. As I say, that's more than double.
Yes.
Presumably, is this right that you would apply the same factor, if that's the right word, or multiplier, to any X-Works price for a panel that you were quoted by a manufacturer?
Yeah, generally speaking, that's correct, yeah.
Right. Is it fair to say that the price per square metre that you were providing compared unfavourably with the Reynobond product or Reynobond quote?
Yes.
Was that deliberate?
On whose part?
Well, let me ask a different way. Why In what respect did the price per square metre compare unfavourably with the Reynobond product?
Well, the Reynobond material is much less than the KME material.
But on what you told us, you would still expect it, the on-the-wall price, to be more than double the quoted price by Reynobond, wouldn't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Then you go on in the email, if it's still on the screen. I have to say, from a Harley selfish point of view, our preference would be to use ACM. It's tried and tested on many Harley projects, and we are confident in the cost base. That said, we are, of course, an envelope contractor and would be happy to clad the building in the material of choice. Is it fair to say that you were trying to put Studio E off KME and the Proteus HR option?
Not at all. We would have been delighted to have used Proteus HR because it was a much higher value. There was no interest to Harley in pushing the cost down. That was driven by the client's budget, not Harley. My comments on the end were perhaps a poor choice of words, saying a Harley selfish point of view, but I was alluding to the fact there that Harley had great experience using ACM and liked using the product.
So just help us. From a Harley selfish point of view, you say your preference would be to use ACM. What drove that preference?
Previous jobs where you go through an awful lot of these exercises and end up at the same place because clients never have the budget, and ACM always proved to be a good product, a good price, and solved a whole raft of issues for these types of jobs. So it was just, from a point of view of Harley, it had used that product on multiple projects and been through this exercise. So, yeah, from that point of view, it was very, very suitable.
Yes, and you go on to say it's tried and tested on many Harley projects, but you go on also to say, and we are confident in the cost base. Were you more confident in the cost base for ACM than the cost base for Proteus HR Composite?
Yes.
Why?
Because we'd used ACM many times. We'd never used Proteus HR Composite. So we had no past experience of saying whether that cost was right, where in ACM we could.
When you say cost base, you don't mean, I assume, the ex-works price quoted to you by KME. Do you mean the extra costs or on-costs added by Harley in order to produce an on-the-wall product?
No, I'm really talking about the ex-works price, because manufacturers are quite crafty. They will quite often not want to commit themselves, and they'll give you a rate. And if you compare that, if you do the job in their product and compare that to what you eventually end up paying, they can sometimes not, shall we say, they're not aligned. You end up paying a lot more. So we had that experience with ACM. We didn't have it with Proteus. So that's what I'm referring to. So we are confident in the cost base because we had that historic data, because we'd used the product on multiple projects.
So in a nutshell, does it come to this, that you trusted Alcoa's Reynobond quotes for ACM, but didn't trust the £282 a square metre for the Proteus HR quoted by KME?
We trusted the Reynobond quotes, but we had no way of knowing whether the other one was correct. We had to take it at face value.
Can we scroll up in the email chain to Mr. Sains's reply, 7th of November 2013 at 21:04? Which is at the bottom of page 1, and I think we're going to need page 2 as well. Thank you for the response. You see that?
Yeah.
Yes. And we can see in the second bullet point there, he says, I think I explained when we met that the VM quartz product is an unfortunate dark tone. It may not be accepted. The Ned Zinc option is much better. Is the rate you've given us for the KME Ned Zinc cheaper overall? My calculation below. And in the third bullet point, we see that Mr. Soanes also asks for rates for ACM and says the client is going to want to include options in the tender for ACM. The standard finish is unfortunate, plastic, Croydon, planner. We have some matte satin and high gloss samples in the office. Please could you indicate appropriate rates for your spreadsheet for different finishes? Rayner Bond, I'm assuming Duragloss 5000. And then also Alcoa Bond Spectra Secura 917. In this context, what did you understand the tender to mean?
We're referring to, is that the, hang on a minute, I've lost my place now.
It's the third bullet point I'm focusing on, Mr. Harris. The client is going to want to include options in the tender for ACM.
Yes. I would take from that the client has decided that he wants to see price options for ACM, which is in fact, I believe from memory, that was in the specification.
Right. So I think I understand that answer. So you understood that the client, the TMO, would want ACM to be included alongside other products in
Yes.
In Harley's pricing for the works.
Well, not just Harley's pricing, but everybody at tender stage. So Harley at that stage was one of many people pricing.
So, in other words, in the NBS specification itself.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. Now let's look on at your response to that, which is higher up in the email chain, 21st of November, page 1. We can see you say, apologies for the delayed response. Only just received a response from Rayner Bond. They were holding out on us because they were originally talking to another company. We'll come back to the question about the delay in a minute. You provide rates for ACM current standard, face fixed and cassette. And at the bottom you say the face fixed on the wall is £187.50p per square metre, plus £7.50 per square metre for special finishes. And the standard rate for cassette on the wall is £232.50p per square metre, plus £7.50 per square metre for special finishes. Where had you obtained those prices from?
I think they were historic ones.
So not as a result of a specific discussion with Rayner Bond, is that right?
Yeah, that would follow. Yeah.
And when you say standard in quotes, what is that a reference to?
ACM manufacturers have standard range of flat colours, so a standard red, standard white, standard yellow. So there's a colour chart with the base range of colours on it, and then if you want to go above that into their special colours, special finishes, then they would become non-standard for want of a better word.
Right. So nothing to do with PE as opposed to FR?
No, absolutely not.
You didn't, I think, in this email provide any response to Mr. Soanes's query. In the second bullet point of his email of the 7th of November I showed you, about the overall pricing for Ned Zinc. We can see that you don't do that. Why is that?
Not sure.
Is it because you didn't like Ned Zinc or didn't want Mr. Soanes to use it?
Not at all. As I said earlier, we based our original tender on that Ned Zinc product. Had no issue with them at all.
Well, from a Harley selfish point of view, as you explained earlier, your strong preference was for Rayner Bond ACM, wasn't it?
Yeah, as I think I said earlier on, that was probably a poor choice of words at the time. What I was really alluding to, excuse me, is that Harley had much more experience and much more certainty with ACM.
Now, Alcoa, do you know this? Alcoa at the time also produced a zinc composite material. Did you know that?
I can't remember whether I knew that or not.
Ms. Deborah French of Rayner Bond has said in a statement that she gave the police in September 2017 that at the time Rayner Bond's zinc composite panel, or ZCM, was produced, and indeed produced with an FR core. Did you know that?
No. But my experience of ACM was that it was ACM. I didn't know there were different grades of material.
Did Deborah French never tell you that, as well as ACM, there was something called a ZCM, a zinc composite panel?
No, I've in fact only learnt about the other grades of ACM materials after the fire. I did not know that before.
Can we then turn to your sales progress report
Sure.
and look at that, HAR 3010160. And I'd like to look at page 2 with you, Mr. Harris, if we can, and your entry for the 12th of September 2013. We've looked at this before, and that's why I'm just taking you back to it, just to set it in set a context for some questions that I'm going to ask you next. But you'll remember that you entered on the 12th of September 2013 the reference to the email that you'd got the day before about wanting assistance on material options, costs and technical details. You see that? Now, can we go to an email of the 8th of November 2013, SEA 409793, please? This is an email from Thomas Reck at Studio E of the 8th of November 2013 to you, as we can see, copied to Bruce Soanes, and it relates to the cladding on the lower floors. And he says, what panel structure would you recommend for the larger panels at walkway and walkway +1 levels? Wall planks with some sort of backing or Rainabond type composite material? Or would you recommend splitting them into, say, 260mm wide planks, but with minimal gap in between to keep the highlight on the 30mm gap? Now, that's, as we can see, would you agree with me, pretty specific advice, or request for pretty specific advice?
Yes.
Was it your understanding at the time that at this early stage of the project, pre-tender, Studio E were reliant on your expertise in answering questions like this as to which cladding products might be suitable at particular locations on the building?
I think we were one of a number of people they were seeking advice from.
Do you know who else they were seeking advice of this nature from?
No, not really, but obviously we knew they'd been speaking to manufacturers and fabricators. In fact, a year before we were even involved, we knew through this process that they'd had conversations with SIG, KME, so they'd obviously spoken to an awful lot of people. And I have to say that's quite normal. That's not unusual activity for an architect. So, yeah, at this stage, we could never know everybody else they were talking to, but we would not have assumed that it was only us.
To your knowledge, were they speaking to any potential specialist cladding subcontractor?
I've no idea.
So far as you were concerned at the time, were you the only potential specialist subcontractor in the frame for this job?
We would never assume that. We could never assume that.
Is it fair to say that you were expected by Studio E to be familiar with the technical specifications of the products you were proposing in order to be able to give the advice that Mr. Reck was asking you for?
I think that's reasonable.
Would you accept also that at this stage, pre-contract, Harley was assisting Studio E with developing 4 tenderers to price?
Yeah, bearing in mind Harley would be one of those tenderers, so yeah, it was high-level advice. Yes.
Yes. And do you accept also that you were helping Studio E to identify and stipulate alternative materials in the tender?
We were giving them advice. We were responding to requests. What they did with it after that was for them. That wasn't our business. We were just providing advice and responding to requests from them.
You were aware, though, I would suggest to you, that the purpose of that advice was so as to be able to enable them to include those alternative materials in the tender documentation.
If they wish to do so, that would be that's a call for them.
Yes. And in making that call, did you understand that they would be relying, at least to some extent, on what you were telling them as a potential specialist subcontractor?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. Now, can I ask you to go to RYD 403972, please? This is an email in April 2014, so this is post-tender, after Ryden had won the tender, but before they formally contracted with the TMO. And it's an email from you to Simon Lawrence, 24th of April. Simon, received a call from Bruce at Studio E. They are working up some cladding details and will email them across to us tomorrow for comment. I've agreed that we will review and make any necessary comments to guide them in the right direction. I'll show you that, and then another document the next day. It's SEA 30107779. This is an email from Kai Fabiunka at Studio E to you. SEA 30107779. Email from Kai Fabiunka to you of the 25th of April 2014, copied to Simon Lawrence, and he says, as discussed earlier, please find attached a couple of 3D images showing the detail we would like to achieve on the ACM rain screen cladding panels. See that? And then 4 paragraphs down, he says, could you please let us know if this could be done using the secret fixing system or if it has to be face-fixed rivets? Would both face-fixing systems be within the budget? Again, is it fair to say that Studio E were, looking at both of these emails I've shown you, reliant on Harley's specialist expertise for the initial cladding design?
Yeah, I think they were asking us a number of questions. I think what I should add at this point is that emails are coming of that nature. As you would have seen in the previous email, I was copying in other people at Harley because I wouldn't be assessing the detail of this email. I was the recipient of it because I was at pre-contract stage the main point of contact, so the conduit through which most information flowed. But in terms of assessing their questions, there would have been others within Harley that would have had to have dealt with that. Even if the response went back from me, I wouldn't be assessing technical questions of this nature.
Yes. But do you accept, as the recipient of the email at least, that Studio E were reliant on Harley's specialist expertise for the initial cladding design, even if not yours specifically, or yours personally?
Well, I don't know that they were relying on it. I think it was part of the process that they were looking at, and we were helping with that.
You were helping. All right. Can I then turn to a different topic, which is Harley's relationship with Alcoa, or Arconic, as it was later named. Can I ask you first to go to your witness statement at page 5? And I'd like to look at paragraph 18, please, with you. And you say there, paragraph 18, as well as Studio E and Ryden, Harley was also liaising with manufacturers, suppliers and fabricators in relation to a number of products that could potentially be used for the cladding of Grenfell Tower. Again, I was the main point of contact for this. My main point of contact at Alcoa, who supplied the Rainabond ACM that was eventually used on Grenfell Tower, was Deborah French. Just pausing there in your statement, can we then look at the email chain that we looked at earlier, I think? HAR 30100172. This is an email that we looked at earlier this morning, Mr. Harris, from you to Mr. Soanes at Studio E on the 21st of November 2013. And you say, as I've shown you, apologies for the delayed response, only just received a response from Rainabond. They were holding out on us because they were originally talking with another company and were concerned about maintaining loyalty on the basis that the other company introduced them to the project. Once I pointed out how much business we do with Rainabond, it focused their attention, ! Is it fair to say that you were drawing attention in this email to the strength of the relationship between Alcoa, who made Reynobond, and Harley.
Yes.
How much business did Harley do with Alcoa at that stage?
I don't know in terms of value, but obviously, if you look at the number of blocks that have been overclad with their product, it was quite a substantial amount. So, but I can't put that into a value.
Is it fair to say, though, that the relationship with Alcoa was a strong one in the sense that Alcoa were the biggest supplier of rain screen panels to Harley for its use on cladding projects?
Yeah, I mean, Harley didn't buy materials direct from Alcoa because Harley didn't fabricate. So Harley would buy through a fabricator, which was CEP in this instance. So CEP would buy the material from Alcoa, and then we would buy it from CEP.
Yes.
But we still had a relationship with Alcoa.
Yes. And that relationship was I'm just seeking to get to the bottom of, although they were the manufacturers and would supply an intermediary fabricator, you had a relationship with Alcoa.
Yes.
And is that because of the products or materials that were supplied for overcladding projects, it was Alcoa who supplied most to Harley?
Yes.
Can we look at CEP 50325? This is an email from Simon Lawrence to you. CEP 50325. Yes. This is an email from I'm so sorry. Can we go to page 2 of that? And it's an email from Simon Lawrence to you on page 2 of the 6th of June 2014.
It's to Bruce Soames as well, isn't it?
Indeed, to Bruce Soames and to you, copy to Ray Bailey. And he says, just to clarify conversations between us all, I put some action points below. And then the penultimate bullet point says, Mark to contact Reynobond about timescales to get materials for mock-up natural aluminium brushed H9103S and champagne metallic E1101S. Now, scrolling up the page if we can, to the next document, we see that the same day, 6th of June 2014, you write to Deborah French, copy to Jeff Blades, and you say, Jeff, to keep you in the loop, this will be no problem for CEP. They have very little on at the moment, ha ha. And the next email up on the following Monday, 9th of June 2014, to you, copy to Jeff Blades, Mark, you're cruel. I will bring the smelling salts round, Jeff. There's a little smiley face and exclamation marks. And then Jeff Blades responds to that, copy to you. He says, nothing's too much for us at the moment. We just keep fabricating rain screen and glazing and then sending it out with whichever project was last spoke about, lol. Mark, all I can say is you'll be taken out for a very nice meal somewhere, very soon, somewhere very nice. Is it fair to say, looking at this email exchange, that at this time at least, you had a close relationship with CEP as well as Alcoa?
Yes.
Now, your role, as you told us earlier, would be pursuing project leads for Harley to get involved in. Looking at this, would it be fair to say that role extended to maintaining links with suppliers, product suppliers, and fabricators?
Yes.
Is it also fair to say that you weren't actually liaising with any other companies who manufactured ACM products, such as Alcoa Bond or 3A Composites?
No, I think not on it. Maybe not on this project, but I certainly had a relationship with 3A Composites, with the chap that was there at the time. He's no longer there, but yeah, I had a relationship with them as well. So it wasn't, and non-ACM supply chain partners as well. It's it's all part of the role.
Yes. But doing a comparison exercise, is it fair to say that you had a stronger professional relationship with Deborah French at Alcoa than with her contemporaries at other, or opposite numbers at other manufacturers?
Yeah, Debbie had been really good, proactive in providing information, samples and things such as that. We did a project called Wayland House, and there was ACM on that building, and there was a requirement for a particular finish, and she did an awful lot of running around for us. So you build up that relationship with somebody and you start to trust them. So, yeah, she'd been very good for us.
Yes. Were any incentives provided for you to use Alcoa and their Rainabond product over any other product made by other manufacturers?
No.
Now, the rates that you gave Mr. Soanes in the email we looked at earlier, if we could just go back to that, it's HAR 3010172, were on-the-wall rates, weren't they?
Yes.
And you told us earlier what on-the-wall means. Face fixed, as we can see, £187.50p per square metre, and cassette, £232.50p per square metre.
Yep.
Can we go, just keeping those figures in mind, 187 for standard face fixed and 232 for standard cassette, can we look at HAR 405512, please? This is an email from Deborah French to you of the 21st of November 2013. So the same day as your email to Bruce Soanes, we've just looked at, in which you gave him the on-the-wall prices of 187 and 232 odd. And in fact, it's 40 minutes earlier than the one you sent to Mr. Soanes, and we can see that she offers you here rates of 32 to 35 pounds per square metre, doesn't she?
Well, she's not offering it to us. She's offering it to an approved fabricator.
All right, I see that. That's not an on-the-wall rate, is it?
No, that's excuse me. That's for sheet material, unfabricated.
So X works, if you like.
Well, yeah, X works. Well, it may even be a delivered rate to somebody like CEP. I don't know, but it's for sheet material. Typically, say 8x4 sheets of the product. That's what she's referring to there, delivered to a fabricator.
Yes. How did you get in the 40 minutes from £32 to £35 as the rate offered to the fabricators to £187.50 and £232.50 for face fixed and cassette respectively?
Well, I think I explained earlier on there were historic rates that have been used on other projects.
Can you break it up? Let's take 32 to 35. How do you get from 32 to 35 to 187? What are the composite elements of that, of the on costs that you add to the 32 to 35 to get to £187.50p?
I don't have a breakdown in front of me, and I wasn't the estimator. However, you would have in there, for example, insulation. You would have the support rail, the substructure that's behind the cladding on which the cladding panel is hung. You would have design that's related to that, installation on site, wastage as well, and then over and above that, overheads and profit.
And what about the fabricator's costs?
Yeah, but they would be added to that.
They would be
So
added. They would be added to what?
They would be in our rate on the wall. So that £32 would be the price that Alcoa would sell to CEP. CEP would then cut it up, fabricate it into panels, and sell it to us for a higher price than that.
And exactly, and what part of the 187 would represent the fabricator's cost per square metre?
I can't remember from that far back, I'm afraid.
But the 187.50 would include the fabricator's costs. Is that right?
Good, yeah.
Yeah.
Good, correct.
Did you calculate these figures yourself, 187 and 232, or did you?
No.
You didn't.
No, they foreign rates.
I'm sorry, we spoke across each other. Let me try the question in a slightly different way. During the 40 minutes between your receiving these prices from Miss French and you passing on the on-the-wall rates to Mr. Soanes on the 21st of November, during that 40-minute period, what did you do to arrive at these on-the-wall figures you were giving to Mr. Soanes?
I probably would have checked in with the estimator very quickly, and we would have looked at other historic projects. Because don't forget, it's not just a case of the projects that were secured by Harley. It would have dozens of projects that it didn't secure or never went ahead. And it would have probably have had lots of cost data from lots of very similar projects. So it would not have been very difficult to have looked one of those up and use that same cost data for something that was very similar.
Comparing the ex-works price and the quoted price for KME, the difference between those, which is more than double, as we saw earlier, with the ex-works price for Rainer Bond ACM and the on-the-wall price, or gross price, the margins available on ACM were vastly higher, weren't they, than the margins available on the Proteus zinc?
Because you're not comparing apples with apples. What you have there is a sheet price. What you had with the zinc price was a fabricated panel price.
But you're not. But this email that's in front of us isn't a fabricated panel. It's a price being offered to fabricators, isn't it?
Correct.
And the same is true, as you told us earlier, in relation to the zinc, the Proteus zinc panel quoted by KME.
No, they are the fabricator. So all of those markups and costs for fabrication and their markups are built into that. Right.
I follow. Even at the marked up rates you offered for Renault Bond, they were still vastly cheaper than the KME products. Certainly the Proteus HR that was quoted.
Yes.
Yes. Can we look at CEP 50244? This is an email. Can we start at the bottom of page 1 from Jeff Blades to Deborah French on the 7th of January 2014, in which he asks her for panel prices. Can you see that? Hi, Debs. Please see the attached range screen spec. Read the above. Can you please advise rates for Rainer Bond accordingly? Now, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
You weren't copied in on that. She responds. If you look up the page, she quotes him rates of £28 per square metre. You see that?
Yes.
And she says they're exceptionally good rates. And this is cheaper, isn't it, than her quote to you of £32 to £35?
Yes, it would seem so.
Do I take it that you weren't aware of what Deborah French was quoting to CEP?
No, and I wouldn't have expected to be. That's a matter for them.
Well, you see, in the email we saw earlier, she was telling you that she was offering fabricators a rate of £32 to £35. That's what she said in the email of the 21st of November. But here, in fact, she's offering CEP, a fabricator, a cheaper rate, £28. My question is, were you made aware of the fact that although she told you she was offering fabricators £32 to £35, in fact she was offering CEP a much cheaper rate, or as she calls it, exceptionally good rates of £28?
No, not aware of that. That's a question for her.
Are you surprised that she was telling you about a rate which was higher than the rate, in fact, that she was offering to fabricators?
Not especially.
She also says, underneath that, hope this is okay to start the bidding with Harley's. I'm sure you or Neil will be back on the phone if you need any other details or reductions. And then there's a, whatever the opposite of a smiley face is. Were you told that there was potential to get the Rayner bond for less?
No.
If you'd been told that, would it have allowed you to revise your on-the-wall estimates downwards?
Yes.
In your email asking for prices, we don't need to go back to it, but it's at HIR 405512 if we do. You didn't specify whether you wanted PE or FR core. Is that because you weren't aware at the time that there was a difference?
Correct.
Or wasn't aware at the time that FR core even existed?
Correct.
Can I ask you to go to CEP 51297, please? This is an email from you of the 24th of April 2014 to Jeff Blades at CEP, copied to Ray Bailey and Mike Albiston. Morning, Jeff. Just to place a note on record regarding the conversations between Debbie French and myself with respect to Grenfell Tower. And you then go on about the rates from Alcoa offer a maximum saving against original zinc. Just in general terms, is it fair to say that you had by this stage relatively extensive conversations with Miss French regarding the Grenfell Tower refurbishment?
Yeah, I think there had been a number of exchanges, yeah.
To your understanding, was Deborah French aware that Grenfell Tower was a tall building which exceeded 18 metres in height?
Yes.
Do you know how she discovered that fact?
Not offhand, but obviously she and Jeff had been in seeing Studio E a year before we were involved, so I assume it goes back to then.
Can we look at CEP 50277? This is an email which you sent Deborah French on the 9th of April 2014. CEP 50277, and again copied to Jeff Blades at CEP. Hi Deb, having now spoken with Ryden after you left Harley House, I am pleased to confirm that they have been officially confirmed as preferred contractor for Grenfell Tower. This is good news for all sorts of reasons, exclamation mark. Do you know why Deborah French had been at Harley House?
She could have been talking about multiple projects, quite honestly, at that period. It was not unusual because Harley would have been tendering, even through this period, multiple projects. Grenfell would have been one of those, so she could have been in speaking about a number of different projects.
Did she often visit Harley House?
No.
So, right. Do you know who was present at that meeting?
No, I don't know.
Were you?
I would imagine so.
Do you remember whether you talked about Grenfell?
I don't, but it wouldn't have surprised me.
When you say, after you say that they've been officially confirmed preferred contractor for Grenfell Tower, this is good news for all sorts of reasons. What were the reasons you were referring to?
Because we'd worked with Ryden's on other tower block projects, and yeah, this was another one. So we felt that was a good situation.
Do you know why you chose to copy Jeff Blades of CEP into this email?
Not specifically.
Can you look at an email at HIR 30s? Sorry, let me just ask this question before I go to it. Were there any arrangements, informal arrangements or understandings in place between you, Deborah French, and Jeff Blades to promote the use or adoption of Reynobond products?
No.
It looks, from what we've been seeing so far, that the relationship between the three of you was pretty cosy, to use a colloquialism. Would you accept that?
No, I'd say it was professional, and we knew each other professionally, and that was all. So it was just a business relationship.
All right.
We dealt with quite a bit.
Can I ask you to go to HAR 30010218? This is at the bottom of page 1, an email from Deborah French to you of the 16th of May 2014. Reynobond Projects Grenfell Towers is the subject. And it's timed at 11:35. She says, following our telephone call, I have attached some images of projects that may be of help in terms of face fixed and rivets. Just to confirm, the colour already proposed for Grenfell Towers is our natural aluminium brushed B4536S. We have a project in London called South Kilburn, which is a cassette project using RB natural aluminium brushed, and she gives the spec. This is not the same as the above, it's more silver in colour. Do you have any recollection of the conversation that she's referring to there?
Vaguely, I recall there was a project that she referred to. I have a feeling UDOE went and visited that site, but I can't be specific about that.
She says that she's attached some images of projects that may be of help. Help with what? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was just the visual appearance. I mean, all through this, all that dominated this process was appearance. Even from Studio E, that conversation was all about colour and appearance. So Debbie was just providing another project with that particular panel on it that they could go and see, rather than just seeing a really small sample on a desk. You can actually see a building with it on. You get a much better idea of what it looks like.
Can I ask you to look at your tender report, HAR 30010160, at page 7, please? And I'd like to look with you at the entry dated the 8th of May, at the bottom of that page, file note. Do you see that? And it says, Steve Blake called just before his meeting with the planners to say that the architect had a patina sample with him and wanted to know what the extra cost would be for this. MAH text message returned to Steve stating that the patina product is not currently available, as per Debbie French email, but that aside, the extra cost would be circa £40,000 to the cladding package based on £10 per square metre times 3,600 square metres, rounded up to the nearest £10,000. MAH suggested to Steve that this product was not shown to the architect. We await post-meeting feedback. MAH to chase next week. Do you recall that conversation?
I don't actually. Obviously, I can see the detail there, so it happened, but I don't remember the conversation.
Do you remember what... I mean, it would follow, I suppose. You don't remember what Mr. Blake's response to that was?
I don't know.
You refer to an MAH text message. Do you still have records of those text messages?
I don't, unfortunately. No.
Do you know why not?
Well, I'm no longer with Harley. I left Harley some time ago. So.
Right. So do you have... This was on a Harley phone, was it?
I can't remember, to be honest with you.
All right. Did you suggest to Mr. Blake that you shouldn't show the pattern of product to Studio E because it was £40,000 more expensive?
Don't know why I said that. Can't remember.
Was the reason for suggesting it wasn't shown to the architect that they didn't choose it?
Don't know.
Would you accept that in deciding or assisting in the architect in deciding what samples... I'm sorry, let me pose the question again in a different way. Would you agree that when deciding what samples the architects and the planners should see, you were exerting some influence on what product was ultimately chosen?
No, I've made a comment, and it's for Steve to decide what he does with that information.
In general terms, would you accept that Harley were influential in getting Renault Bond into the NBS spec at the end of 2013, and then in 2014 helping to get it chosen out of all the available options?
No, I think we were part of the process with responding to requests for information on cost on a number of different products and a number of different samples. From Harley's point of view, if the specification for the zinc had held, then the contract value would have been much higher, and thus no interest to Harley in having a much lesser contract value. It was client budget that drove it away from that, so we were just being helpful.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, that's a convenient moment for the lunch break, if it's convenient to you.
Good, thank you very much. Well, Mr. Harris, it's just after 1 o'clock, so it's time to have a break for lunch. We'll resume at 2 o'clock, please. And please don't talk to anyone at all about your evidence or anything to do with it during the break, all right?
Okay.
Thank you very much, and we'll meet again at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 2 o'clock.